Well, howdy, folks. Sorry if I look a little messy. Mowed the yard today, so yeah, I look a little roughed up and a little dirty. But hey, I needed to come on here and finish these videos because we're in the middle of doing a collection set of videos based on faith-based films. Now today we're going to talk a little bit more about some studio films, some studio released films, and some independently released films, or independently produced films, I should say. There are some Christian studios and distributors and things like that, but the major studios are picking up on that, and they're piggybacking on a lot of these films. That being said, I'm going to kick things off by giving an honorable mention. This one just came out. It's called The Miracle Season. Was released by LD Entertainment. It is from the director of Soul Surfer, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. I haven't seen this film. It stars Helen Hunt and William Hurt. I just got this. Have not been able to watch it. Unfortunately, you notice that this is a DVD copy. It's because they have not released this movie on Blu-ray. Why is that? I do not know. But yeah, it's only available on DVD, but the positive thing is, it can be had cheap, $15. But it's not available on Blu-ray, and you shoot these movies in high definition, so come on. Anyway, enough for the honorable mention. Let's dive right into what I've got here. This is the first set. There's a few more down here at the bottom. More than a few, but anyway, we'll get right into it. This first one I want to take a look at is Amazing Grace. Was an independently produced film. It was released by Samuel Goldwyn Pictures, produced by Bristol Bay Productions. It was from the producers of, basically from the people who made Ray, the Ray Charles biopic. This one stars Young Griffith and a young, can't think of his name, Doctor Strange. What is he? Played Sherlock Holmes. Benedict Cumberbatch. There we go. Benedict Cumberbatch is in this film, as well as Albert Finney and Michael Gambon. And there's just it's directed by Michael Apted, a legendary British film director. Now this film is based on the story of Amazing Grace. The classic hymn Amazing Grace. This is what the whole thing was about, and there's a whole. The man who wrote it was John Newton, and that is this man right here, played by Albert Finney. He ended up becoming a preacher, but in his young life, he was the captain of a slave ship. And he ended up transposing Amazing Grace to music, and the whole film is about the slave trade and recognizing that these Africans, they weren't African Americans, but Africans, they are people too. And that they were created by God just as much as we are. So yeah, Amazing Grace. The next one is Bella. Who is it stars in this? Eduardo Vestigi is his name. It's an Italian name. Um, Independently produced. Released by Roadside Attractions. It's well. Let me read the synopsis. A international soccer star is on his way to a multi-million-dollar contract when a series of events unfold that brings his career to an abrupt end. A beautiful waitress struggling to make it in New York discovers something about herself she's unprepared for. In this one irreversible moment, their lives are turned upside down until a simple gesture of kindness brings them both together, turning an ordinary day into an unforgettable experience. Yeah, it's... So yeah, Bella is actually another word for beauty. So, yeah, and of course, these films vary in rating. I probably should give the film is rated PG-13, and it has, a lot of people think that these faith-based films are really always family-friendly, but the truth is, a lot of these movies tend to have a hard edge to them. And there's another film, I don't think I grabbed it, but there's another film that's a little hard-edged in dealing with reality. But yeah, this one was PG-13. Amazing Grace was rated PG. However, it had some, calling African Americans the N-word, and yeah, it was just, so, yeah, just because these are faith-based films doesn't always mean that they're family-friendly, so, yeah. Let me check and see here if I grab that one film. I'm looking really quickly. Sorry, you're looking at my butt or something like that. Now, I grabbed it now. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. In fact, I'll put it in the file so I don't forget to talk about it. It just happens, when you're going through picking all these movies that you skip a few. The next up, I'm going to talk about both of these films because they're both titled The Case for Christ. What's the difference? Well, they're both about Lee Strobel, okay? Well, first of all, we'll put this one away and just talk about this one. This is actually the film that Lee Strobel himself made in 2007. He had written the book, The Case for Christ. And if you don't know who Lee Strobel was, he was this very famous writer for the Chicago Tribune. And he was exposing all these big cases, and he ended up becoming a Pulitzer. I think he ended up becoming a Pulitzer Prize winner. But anyway, he got all this notoriety, and he was an atheist. And one day, his wife, who was also an atheist, she finally accepted the fact that Christ is real, and she became a believer. She became baptized. And so this angered Mr. Strobel to the point where he was going to prove that God does not exist. And so he went on a complete investigation. Did a complete, like he would for a crime story. Started investigating the historical facts. Started digging through history, started digging through science and archaeological things, and of course what the people had to say. And so Thus, in the long run, Lee Strobel became a Christian. And he, instead of, well, what he was going to do, he was going to write this editorial basically disproving all Christianity. That was what he was going to set out to do. Instead, he ended up writing a book that proved the exact opposite. And so this film is a documentary film. This actually goes into Strobel's investigation, what he found out. And the film is 71 minutes. It's not rated. Independently produced by the Carmel Group. Lionsgate ended up releasing it on DVD. But it proves the facts are there. And it encourages, non-believers to do the same. Now that leads us to the film, The Case for Christ. This is the dramatic story, the dramatization of Lee Strobel, what he was going through at the time of his conversion and his wife's conversion, and how when she became a believer, she, first of all, did not stop praying for him. And that was one of the key things that got him through, or got, him turned around. They did a really good job of depicting the period of time, and the period of time that this took place was in 1980. So if you look at all the cars and all the hair and all the thing, yeah, it looks like something jumped out of 1979, 1980, and was placed right into this film. And it's a really well-made film, starring Mike Vogel. Mike Vogel's been in films like Poseidon, the Cloverfield, the first Cloverfield movie, Eric and Christensen, Academy Award winner Faye Dunaway is in this, and Robert Forster. So yeah, and it was released by the film company Pure Flix Entertainment. You're going to see a lot of those films here in this collection. And now Pure Flix has a distribution deal with Universal to bring all their movies onto home video through Universal Pictures. So yeah, and the film's rated PG. It does have some there is a little bit of alcohol consumption. There's also there's a light case of profanity, like a light word that's used. It's more of a crude word than anything else. And there's also a scene depicting of the crucifixion, going through a like an autopsy like situation. Yeah, The Case for Christ. And now we'll go up here to, this is probably one of the most legendary faith-based films, actually produced by a studio. This was produced by Warner Brothers, and it's Chariots of Fire. A lot of people neglect the fact that it really is a faith-based film that actually happened based on a true story. And of course, this film is remembered for its legendary theme song, da 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 da, but it's based on the true story of, let me see here. It's been a while since I've actually seen the movie, so I forget who it was about. Abraham's, and what was the Christian? Eric Liddell and Harold Abrahams. Yeah, there you go. And it's about these two guys who were, one was a Jew and the other one was a Christian. And they refused to run in a race for the Olympics on Sunday. Because they believed that was the day, the Lord's day, and they, in terms of their faith, did not want to give up. They didn't want to neglect. They put God first instead of what they were going to accomplish in terms of an Olympic gold medal. I know I'm kind of rambling on. I'm kind of stumbling on my words. I forgot another one. And I'll get to that one in a second. The next one here is Do You Believe? Also from Pure Flix. This one's how do I want to describe this one? Basically, this is a film that puts faith into action, I guess you might say. How do I want to say this to describe this movie? It basically demonstrates the power of the cross, and with the cross is a symbol, and what does that mean? It's the film is asking a question with the title: Do you believe? And this film has quite a star-studded cast. Mira Sorvino, Sean Astin, Alexa Pinavega, Ted McGinley, Andrea Logan White, Sybil Shepherd, and Lee Majors is all in this film. So, yeah, quite this. And this one was rated PG-13. Has thematic elements, an accident sequence, and some violence. So, yeah, this one's by Pure Flix Entertainment. I gotta say, for being a little independent studio, a little independent Christian distribution, they're putting out, and I believe, some good quality work. And this one was before they got into a deal with Universal, so they put out their own Blu-rays and DVDs, but they realized that's kind of expensive, so they got a hold of a studio to help them distribute. Now this next one is called Into the Spear, and it's about these missionaries that travel into the Amazon jungle with these primitive tribes to not only teach them, give them an education, but also teach them about God. And this team goes over, the first wave of this team goes over, and the first wave is pretty much killed by the tribe. And then the second wave comes over, and it's women and children, and they end up witnessing to these Amazon tribe members that there is such a thing as there's only one God, and it's Jesus Christ. But then also the tribe member that it also centers around this little boy, and his dad was killed by this man. But then years go by, the boy, grown up, returns, and the man is asking for forgiveness because he said, "I killed your father." And at first, the man is very angry. He wants to kill that man, but he realized that would be the wrong thing to do, and that this man, he knows that he's wrong and is willing to make right for that. And it's based on a true story. In the reality of the real story, this man did actually become like a father and a grandfather to this man's children. To to redeem his place. This film had a little controversy with it because not the fact that well, first of all, it does have a PG-13 rating for some violence in it, and it did have a little bit of controversy in it because the actor that plays the father and the boy grown up is an actor by the name of Chad Allen. Chad Allen was in the show Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. He played the oldest brother. But he is a homosexual. And a lot of the Christian community and some of the filmmakers, or not the filmmakers, but some of the Christian community was not very happy that they cast him. But that shouldn't really be the focus that you have. You can't really force that upon your actors or people that are helping you tell your story. You need to love them the same. And so the film came out and was shown in churches and theaters all over the nation, and of course the story is still inspires people to this day. So next up we have, now why are you saying that? You may be saying to yourself, why is Evan Almighty in here? Well, I'm going to be honest. I do not have Bruce Almighty. I do have Evan Almighty. But if you were to take Evan Almighty and boil it down, it is a modern day telling of Noah's Ark. Just done a little funny with Steve Carell and Morgan Freeman, who's an atheist playing God. And it does have some very funny moments, and it is a modern day telling of Noah's Ark. It's probably more faithful than Darren Aronofsky's Noah. It is family friendly. It's only rated PG. There is a few things in here that's, a little crude. It's like how many times does Steve Carell get hit in the crotch by something? And yeah, Evan Almighty. And then next up we got Forever My Girl. This kind of fits in the vein with like a Nicholas Sparks movie. This one was made by also made by LD Entertainment and Roadside Attractions, released by Lionsgate on home video. And it's about this guy who he's an aspiring country music singer, and he's supposed to marry his I think it's his high school sweetheart. I'm not sure, but anyway, he ends up so he's supposed to marry this girl, and then his song that he wrote and recorded ends up being a huge hit on radio. On the day of their marriage, he doesn't show up. And little do neither one of them know that she is also pregnant with their child. So yeah, you can say there's a little controversy there about, sex outside of marriage, but the point is that this is a film about forgiveness and faith and trust. And so, after was it 8 years or something like that, he comes back home and he finds out, hey, that she's got a daughter. Who's the daddy? And they end up rekindling the romance and the relationship, and getting back together. So that's one pile. Let's see what we can squeeze in here. Okay. First off, I have 2 of the God's Not Dead series. The third one has yet to come out yet. I think that comes out later on this month. But yeah, here's God's Not Dead. This is the one that starred Kevin Sorbo and Shane Harper and Dean Cain, as well as cameo appearances by Willie and Corey Robertson of Duck Dynasty fame. And this film is the one that started it all. And this is the film where a college professor who is an atheist tries to convince his entire student body that God doesn't exist. Well, you have one student, played by Shane Harper, whose name is Josh in the film. He says, no, I disagree with that statement 100%, and I am going to defend my faith. And so the professor says, okay, now you need to prove to me that God does exist. And so what happens is the kid ends up, he says, simple, we're going to put God on trial. And the more the kid, kind of like with the case for Christ, the more that he digs deep into this, the more it debunks and destroys atheism and the Big Bang Theory and all this stuff that man made. And the more it comes down to it, the professor he's still not accepting of it until he finally wheels down to the end, to the simple question, okay, why does, if God exists, why does he allow all bad things to happen? And that's the question that a lot of atheists want to ask. Okay, why does God allow bad things to happen? And the kid puts it simple. Free will. People choose it. So, and I'm not going to reveal the whole entire ending to you, but yeah, this is a great film. Atheists hate it, which I don't care. This is a really good film, because it just completely destroys, everything that they preach in one film. And then we carry over to God's Not Dead 2, where a school teacher, played by Melissa Joan Hart, is put on trial because she preached Christianity a little bit in a little bit of history. Even though one of the students in her class had a question about Christ. And so she's put on trial for, basically preaching Christianity in a public school. And and of course and as you can see in the film, that there's this political uproar and people and taking one side or the other, and these films really throw out the attacks that come against Christianity. But here's the thing. Christianity should never, ever, ever, ever be regarded as a way to push popularity. Because I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It's actually not a secret. It's in the Bible. Christianity was never regarded as something popular. As a matter of fact, the term Christian is actually a derogatory term. It's an insult. Because people died for their belief. And even Christ has said that, what does it profit a man to gain the world yet forfeit his soul? We can, I have a lot of stuff, but you know what? A lot of this stuff is worthless, because it'll be here one moment and gone the next. I'm admitting that. But let's move on. Those are the God's Not Dead series. This is one that Pure Flix themselves distributed, and this one was by Universal that they kindly brought out on to DVD and Blu-ray. And now one more thing I want to mention about that is, what was I going to say? Yeah, Universal. Oh no, not Universal Pictures, but about the God's Not Dead series. One more thing, and that is they wrote those stories, original stories, based on real events, real where people are being tried or put into bad situations because of their faith. If you watch the film, watch the ending credits. Before the actual credits roll, it says God's Not Dead was inspired by all these stories, and it shows up all these different cases and a brief description of what the person is accused of, and how how a Christian organization or attorneys would step in and fight for these people. Okay, we'll move on to the next set. I think I'm going to do this a few at a time. This next one is Grace Unplugged. Basically, this is a modern day telling of the prodigal son. Just the fact that it's a female instead of a male character. It's about this girl whose name is Grace, and her dad was he had a one-hit wonder back in the 80s. And he ended up, in a bad way with, doing drugs and drinking and all that stuff. But then he decided to, I'm going to give my life to Jesus. And so he lets go of all that stuff, becomes a family man, and Grace is born. Grace kind of follows right in Dad's footsteps. She loves music. She loves she leads worship with her dad in church, but then that's not enough for her, and so one day her dad's old manager stops by the church, and he hears Grace perform her dad's song. And the longer that she goes into this famous life, she realizes the more destructive it is, and that pretty soon she's having alcoholic drinks with this movie star like guy who she doesn't really know. He kind of treats her very poorly, and then tabloids start showing up and smearing her name, and the manager wants her to record a song that is very profane and very dirty lyric, and she can't do it, and she realizes that it's, you know, she's gone down a road that's not healthy, and then comes back home to realize that she was wrong. So it's kind of the prodigal son story. Yeah, and I quite enjoyed it. It was really, first of all, it's got AJ McKella, I believe that's her name. She was in a Disney Channel movie. I'm trying to think what she was in. She was in one of those Disney Channel movies, and she was kind of on a way of being like a Disney Channel star, but then she backed out of it. And James Denton and Kevin Pollak, who you know from TV, and he's been in several movies. And next up is Mel Gibson's Hacksaw Ridge. I'm putting this in here because it really is about a man of faith. Yes, this is rated R. It's got violence, language, and you know, some bad things in it. So parents, do take this in consideration if you are trying to get ideas for family movie night. This would not be on your list, but this is about a faith-based story about a man by the name of Desmond Doss. He volunteered. I think he volunteered. But anyway, he served in World War II, but he did not want to fight with a gun. He refused to fight with a gun, and he ends up saving several of his brothers in arms, and by dragging them to safety, basically. And he was 100% set on his faith. It was distributed by Summit Entertainment, which is a division of Lionsgate. Directed by Mel Gibson. Kind of put people interested back into Mel Gibson after some of the things that he's done in the past. Yeah, Hacksaw Ridge. Next up, Heaven is for Real. To a Sony Pictures release. Interesting little thing. This is directed by Randall Wallace, who was the screenplay writer of Braveheart. So, talking about Hacksaw Ridge, Mel Gibson. He also directed We Were Soldiers with Mel Gibson, which is just a war film. But he directs Heaven is for Real. And this is also produced by T.D. Jakes. Stars Greg Kinnear and Thomas Hayden Church, and it's based on the New York Times bestseller about this little boy by the name of Colton. Uh, Man, I forget the last name, but it's a kind of a silly sounding name. But this it's just about this little boy by the name of Colton, who at a very young age has his appendix ruptures, and they don't know what it is. They just think it's the flu, and he ends up having surgery. And during the surgery, he died, and he ends up going to heaven. And when he comes back, and they revive him, and he comes back, and he ends up telling his family about what he saw, and all the knowledge that he gains from seeing all these things. And at first the family doesn't believe him, but then things start happening that are proven true. And they said maybe he did go to heaven. And I will say this, quick capsule review. Read the book first, then watch this movie, because there's a lot in the movie there's a lot in the book that the movie skips out. And there's some things that like, for example, there's some things in there that are taken out because I think it was just simply deemed too controversial for the studio. Like spiritual warfare, that there is a battle between heaven and hell. That is described in the book. That is not described in the movie, because they don't want to talk about hell. Just the good parts, just heaven. But yeah, it still isn't a very good movie to watch, but I would encourage you, please read the book. You will get a lot more out of the book than you will the movie. Trust me. And now next up is another film from Pureflix Entertainment. This is a little bit different. This is actually a documentary film and a worship film. It is Hillsong, Let Hope Arise, the movie. Originally this was supposed to be released by Warner Brothers, but for whatever reason, Warner Brothers passed, and Pureflix picked it up and only did it as Selective City. But it went nationwide as on DVD. Universal distributed on Blu-ray and DVD. The film basically goes into the lives of... there's an advertisement for another film I want to talk about. It goes into the lives of the group Hillsong United. It goes into a little bit about Hillsong, the church in Australia, but it's mostly Hillsong United and the members of the group and their families. The thing is, the takeaway from this film is that it's all about Jesus. That's the main thing, and that's what they have plastered right all over. It's about Jesus. But it also goes into the fact about that they're one of the top selling artists on the music charts right now. But yet they don't make any money. It all goes back to the ministry. That's just really interesting. But moving on, this film was originally supposed to be released by 20th Century Fox in 2004, shortly after The Passion of the Christ came out. 20th Century Fox announced that they were going to make Fox Faith DVDs and put out a string of movies theatrically under the Fox Faith brand. Well, this was going to be one of those films until it received an R rating from the Motion Picture Association of America. It is a film called House. Actually, is a kind of a Christian horror film, you might want to call it. Starring Michael Madsen and Bill Moseley. Bill Moseley has been in like the Rob Zombie movies and things like that. So, the movie centers around a group of people, mostly a married couple, that they're on the eve of divorce, but they had just lost their daughter in a tragic accident. And so they end up traveling on the way to the lawyer to talk about divorce. And they end up in an accident, and they're stranded, and they find this house. It's like a bed and breakfast like house, and they go in, and there's this other couple there, and they're greeted by a family of people who are strange. They're not ordinary family people. And so the more things that go on, that there's supposedly a killer outside called the Tin Man, and he drops a tin can down into the house, and basically saying, if you don't confess your sins, somebody's going to die. And the deeper that they get into the house, they realize that these people, that the family is devil worshippers. And the devil is constantly bringing up their old sin and confess. And then there's this girl who's the exact opposite. And she kind of looks kind of creepy, but she's not. She's anything but. She is the light in the midst of the darkness. Now, why would you say that this is a Christian-based film? It's rated R. It's a horror story, because the fact is that this was written by a couple of Christian authors. They wrote a book together. The authors are Frank Peretti and Ted Decker. And they like writing stories like this. And that is, their mission is to prove that, that there is good and then there's evil. And there is a war going on. We cannot see this war always, but sometimes we do. And this is a situation where they are caught up in the war. And and the main thing is that the light will always destroy the darkness. So it does have some twists and some turns in this film. It is rated R because it is very intense. There's not a drop of blood. There's not one use of profanity. It is just intensely. It is very, very intense. So yeah, in Lionsgate was the one that ended up picking this up. So okay, next up, we got a couple Sony Pictures releases here. We got Mom's Night Out, which was actually a Pure Flix co-production with Sony Pictures, starring Sarah Drews, Sean Ashton, Patricia Heaton, and Trace Adkins. Directed by the Irwin brothers, who you'll see later on in other films. And it's just this comedy about these group of moms decided to have a night to themselves, and when the dads take over, chaos ensues. Yeah, and then we got Miracles from Heaven, starring Jennifer Gardner, and Queen Latifah, and some other people. Again, from the producers of Heaven is for Real. This is a very, very similar story. It's about this little girl. She has a disorder in her small intestine. She can't digest food. And it would have killed her. And then she has an experience similar to like the little boy in Heaven is for Real, and she's completely healed. And it's Jennifer Gardner is trying to find out what is wrong. She keeps taking the girl to specialist after specialist, and realize that what happened to her eventually is nothing short but a miracle. And then we got Let There Be Light, which is directed by directed and starring Kevin Sorbo. Also produced by Sean Hannity. Completely independent production. I can't tell you the name of the... Is it Atlas Distribution? Ended up making this film, or distributing the film. Also has Travis Tritt in it. Anyway, it's similar to God's Not Dead, and the fact that this Kevin Sorbo plays another atheist trying to prove God doesn't exist, but mostly you find out that he's really mad at God for taking his son. His son died in a tragic accident, and I'm trying to see here. Yeah, tragic accident, and it's just really a story about getting back to salvation. You know, let there be light. The next up is the Left Behind films I have. I only have 2 of them. There's a reason why. These movies are so bad. Stick with the books, the Left Behind books. The movie, every movie adaptation of Left Behind has been terrible. Even Nicolas Cage. I have not seen it, but I've heard horrendous things. There is one thing I think they did really, really well in the film, and that is the rapture, where people just vanish. The Christians just vanish. And how they did it is just, that was well done, is that it just happens when you least expect it. But however, it's, the story centers around Kirk Cameron. He plays this news reporter by the name of Buck Williams. He works for, in the book it's actually CNN, but in here it's called GNN because they couldn't get CNN to license that name, their name. In this film is basically what happens to the people and the rise of the Antichrist. And then the part 2 is more the continuation of the rise of the Antichrist, but also to expose to the world, start to spread the gospel throughout the world, you know, that this guy's a false prophet. And so, yeah. The third one I do not have. It's just I did not really care for. It was just really, really bad. I don't even care for those two. But they are what they are. And next one. This one was actually released by, it's an independent production, but it was distributed by 20th Century Fox theatrically, briefly, and but then they turned it out on DVD. This one it's called The Last Sin Eater, and it's directed by Michael Landon Jr., who had just come off the Love Comes Softly series, and they thought he was a good candidate to direct this film because it kind of fits in that same style. It's about this little girl by the name of Cotty Forbes, and it takes place in this Appalachian village, and they're pagan worshippers. They believe that they really don't believe in redemption and until your death. And so they have this man who dresses up as what they call a sin eater, and at the person's death they place a cup of wine nearby them and a piece of bread on top of their corpse. And so the sin eater comes, and no one can look at the sin eater. He is cloaked. They have to have their backs turned to him. And so he eats this bread and drinks the wine, thus condemning himself to set this person free of sin. But then this little girl, Cotty, her sister is killed by something that she did. And but one day that there's a preacher traveling through, and so she tells the preacher what happened, and that instead of dealing with, until death, she had the sin eater take her sin away then, but she doesn't feel any different. But the preacher man says, Cotty, there was only one sin eater, and his name is Jesus. And he's already taken that away from you. And he said, if you know the truth will set you free. And so, that's all I'm going to say, because it is a film that you do need to check out. The film stars Louise Fletcher. You know her as Nurse Ratched from One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Henry Thomas, Elliot from E.T. So, and he plays the preacher. But yeah, it's very, very good story. It's rated PG-13 because there's some brutally violent scenes in the film. But yeah, The Last Sin Eater. Let me see here. There's another one I forgot. I'm just keep adding it to them. Okay, I'm gonna squeeze it here. We got I'm Not Ashamed, distributed by Pureflix Entertainment. Story about Rachel Joy Scott, who was the first victim of the Columbine massacre. Very, very. This film tore me apart. It really did. It just ripped me to shreds. I couldn't stop thinking about it. when I walked out of the theater. I saw this. This was a film that was released selective city. It did not go nationwide because of there had just been a school shooting at the time, and they didn't want to stir up any trouble, politically and so on and so forth. But the film stars Macy McLean, Ben Davis, who is in the film Courageous, playing the young man, Sadie Robertson, Corey Robertson, Christian music singer Jackie Velasquez, and yeah, it's just a powerful, powerful film. And it just, man, this film, I can't get this film out of my mind, really, to be honest with you. And I gotta grab one more because I forgot it. Like I said, I just keep adding to it. Yeah. And it should be next up on the list, really, or before that. Letters to God. A PG-rated film, distributed by Vivendi Entertainment. Vivendi actually is the parent company of Universal, so yeah, based on a true story, about a boy that had cancer, and he was writing letters to God, and ended up bringing a lot of healing and joy to the people, making an impact on the people around him. There's no big stars, except the one girl, Bailey Madison. I think she was on, what was she on? Wizards of Waverly Place, yeah. I knew she was on a Disney Channel show. I just couldn't think of it. Next one is Lionsgate release of I Can Only Imagine. Probably the runaway hit of all the Christian cinema this year. It was a surprise hit. Made Hollywood scratch their heads. And it's based on the story behind the song I Can Only Imagine. Starring J. Michael Finley, Madeline Carroll, Trace Adkins, Priscilla Shire, and Dennis Quaid. This one was also directed by the Irwin brothers, who did Mom's Night Out. But yeah, another powerful movie about, because I knew what the song was about before ever seeing this movie, but I had no idea what went into how that song really did come about. It was really powerful stuff. Next up is I Am David. It's got Jim Caviezel and Joan Plowright. Directed by Paul Feig of the infamous Ghostbusters reboot. It's about this orphan who has grown up to, has developed bitterness and hatred in his life, but then throughout his journey, he ends up learning to love and forgive and just enjoy life. It was distributed by Lionsgate and Walden Media. So yeah, I better straighten my pile up. It's about to fall over. Okay, I'm not adding any more. And we got Ragamuffin, which is based on the life of Rich Mullins. I don't know what else to say about that. It's made by Millennium Entertainment. Same kind of Different as Me, which is a fairly newer one that came out. Starring Greg Kinnear, John Voight, Renee Zellweger. It's a Paramount release. to save a life. I want to definitely talk about this one. This one is definitely one of those hard Christian films. You know, it's a hard watch. Really is, because this is a film that deals with what kids today go through in high school, and all this temptation that they have to go through, and even suicide and drugs and teen pregnancy. It's a hard movie to watch. It's produced by Samuel Goldwyn Films. The Christian group New Song produced this movie. Stars Randy Wayne. He's been in like the Honey movies, and I can't think of what else he's been in, but directed by Brian Baugh, who also did I'm Not Ashamed. Another film I really want to talk about, The Shack. Very, very controversial film. Because I enjoyed the film. Don't get me wrong. However, there are things in this story that are not true. First of all, God was not crucified on the cross with Christ. It was just Jesus. And but the really big one that just is that there is no punishment for sin. That is false. I hate to be the one to bear that news to you. It's in the Bible. The only way is to have your sins forgiven by the acceptance of Jesus Christ. But to just up and say that there is no punishment for sin, that's ludicrous. That's what this film and the book teach. That there's no punishment for sin, and that God just loves everybody, which He does. But if you don't have that relationship with Him, you're lost. Sorry, I mean, but there was things in here I really do love, and the fact is that one of the things I do love about the film is that about forgiveness. And how even if, because in the story, the man, his daughter is murdered, and he finds it very, very difficult to forgive the murderer. In which he does. I don't know if I could do that. And there's this scenario that is set up for him to where he's put on God's judgment throne and judging, and he realizes he's not a good judge. God is the good judge. That's what I enjoyed about it. But the things that are wrong in the film, that, and it's in the book that way, about God not punishing anybody for sin, the whole universalism thing with the Holy Spirit, that's not right. There's a detailed, go to movieguide.org and just look up The Shack, and they will explain it to you what's wrong with it, really. Next film, 6, and it's another post-apocalyptic, end times Christian-based film, starring Stephen Baldwin, David A.R. White, and Kevin Downes before they ended up becoming Pure Flix Entertainment. This is back when they were known as ChristianCinema.com. Also, Eric Roberts is in this. And this was also a co-production of Trinity Broadcasting Network. Paul Crouch is listed as producer. It has its moments. Next up is The Song, based on the Song of Solomon. It's very similar to what I described with that other film, Forever My Girl, but it's a modern day telling of the Song of Solomon. So, you have Jeb. Here, the character's name is Jeb, but or Jed, sorry, Jed, going off and fulfilling his dad's footsteps, and the temptations and the struggles that he ends up going through in his life, and restoring his first love. It's a Sony Pictures DVD, it was originally distributed by Samuel Goldwyn. Stars Alan Powell, Ali Faulkner, Caitlin Nicole Thomas, Danny Vinson, Gary Jenkins, Aaron Bernward, and so on and so forth. Next up is Soul Surfer, which is a Sony Pictures release with Anna Sophia Robb, Helen Hunt, and Dennis Quaid, and Carrie Underwood as well. No, this isn't a bootleg. I bought one of those movies you buy things and put it in a case, so I just printed off, found the cover, and did a pretty poor job of cutting it up. But anyway, it's about the true story of Bethany Hamilton and her struggle when she was when her arm was taken off by a shark, and it's about her journey of getting back on the surfboard. So, and it's the true story about how that happened. Next up, another Ted Dekker story, 3. It's another Christian horror film. It's about this guy with a split personality, and how faith comes into play, and how it defeats the darkness. And I'll follow that up with I just had it in my mind, Frank Peretti story by the same filmmakers, The Visitation. This one has Randy Travis, Edward Furlong, and Kelly Lynch, and Martin Donovan. And it's about a demonic presence that comes into this small town. There's a preacher that's lost his faith after his wife has died, and how the preacher renews his faith by defeating this possessed man that's going around putting demons and curses on people, and they think they're being healed, but they realize that they're cursed. And then the last two, we got 2 football movies. When the Game Stands Tall, starring Jim Caviezel and Michael Chiklis and Laura Dern. This one's a Sony Pictures release, PG rated film, based on a true story about the De La Salle High School Spartans and their winning season. And it's actually it is based on a true story. It's from the director of Coach Carter. If you ever seen Coach Carter, it was a film by that had my brain's fried. Had Samuel L. Jackson in it, where he locks the kids out of the gym. But yeah, When the Game Stands Tall. And from the Irwin Brothers and Pureflix Entertainment, we have Woodlawn. A really well done movie, kind of in the same vein as Facing the Giants and Remember the Titans. Stars Sean Astin, John Voight, Nick Bishop, Caleb Castile, and Sherry Shepard. And it's a really, really great movie to watch. You know, if you love football movies, those two I don't think you can go wrong with. But yeah, Woodlawn. Again, based on a true story. And it's Pureflix, another Pureflix Universal Pictures release. So I would encourage you to pick up those movies and check them out. The only one I really has seriously had problems was The Shack. Again, these movies vary from, just because they're a faith-based film and centered around Christianity, does not mean that they're not subject to the R rating. So please do take that in consideration when you're choosing this entertainment for your families, especially movies like House, which is R-rated because it's just terrifyingly intense. So do keep these things in mind. Do keep the MPAA rating in check when you are choosing these films. Another great website to check out is movieguide.org. Check out what they have to say about a lot of these films, because they'll give their critic rating, and then they'll give their moral rating of, like, you know, where does this stand with the Bible, and so on and so forth. But from me to you, see you later. I think next time will be the last time about faith-based films, and I'm going to go into the TV shows. And that should be the end of it. So from me to you, see you later.